The winter I learned why our county never plowed Old Mill Road before sunrise was the winter I stopped working nights for good. I'm a guy, 39 now, and I ran a snowplow for a rural county highway department in the upper Midwest for most of my 20s. I'm not going to name the county because I still live within driving distance of the place, and I don't want some reporter or YouTuber showing up at the shop asking about the ghost road. But if you've ever driven from Fargo down into rural Minnesota or the Dakotas in January and watched the wind-carved white rivers across two-lane blacktop, you know what it looks like where I live. Endless fields, shelter belts of bare trees, old farmhouses slumped into themselves. And in winter, the only thing between life and death is 4 inches of asphalt and the guy in the plow in front of you. That guy used to be me. The first time I heard about Old Mill Road was on my second day at the job. The foreman, a stocky, red-faced guy we all called Red because of his hair, had just finished running us new hires through the equipment. How to drop the blade, how to salt, how to kick the spreader back on when it choked up with frozen sand. We were in the break room afterward, 6 of us squeezed around a scarred wooden table under humming fluorescent lights, drinking coffee that had been on the burner since before sunrise. Somebody had taped a pin-up calendar to the back of the fridge 10 years ago, and it had never come down. The room smelled like wet wool and diesel. Red slapped a count-to map down on the table and started going over routes. A marker line traced loops and spurs, each corner of the county a different color. This one here, he said, tracing a pale blue squiggle that cut diagonally across the map, is Old Mill Road, County 47 on your GPS. It's the shortest way from town to the east side and the only straight shot to the nursing home out there. He looked up at us, his eyes hard in a way I didn't expect over something as boring as a stretch of county road. "You will not plow this stretch before daylight in a blizzard," he said. "I don't care who calls. I don't care if the sheriff himself is screaming that his grandma's out there. You run up to the barricades at County 10, you turn around, and you log it. Understood?" The other guys nodded like they'd heard this speech 100 times. I frowned. "What if there's an ambulance that needs through?" I asked. I thought the whole point was keeping the emergency routes open. A couple of the older drivers shifted in their seats, glancing at Red like they were waiting to see how much he'd tell us. Red stared at me for a long second, then jabbed his finger at the blue line again. "That piece of road kills more people than it saves in a whiteout," he said simply. "We put up the barricades and sand what we can once the sun's up. At night, it's shut. Last guy who broke that rule, well, we'll get there." He straightened the map. "Just remember, Old Mill in daylight, fine. Old Mill in the dark, no. You got that, Jake?" He'd used my name. I nodded. "Yeah, got it." One of the other drivers, a lanky guy named Mason with permanent grease under his nails, swallowed a mouthful of coffee and muttered, "Bus didn't get the memo." Red shot him a look that could have cut glass. "Enough," he said. "We ain't telling ghost stories. We're talking routes." But the seed was planted. Later that afternoon, when things were slow and I was pretending to reorganize a tool cabinet, I asked Mason what he'd meant. He glanced toward the office, then leaned on the workbench. "Old Mill Road used to be the main drag between town and the river communities," he said. "Back in the 70s, there was this old one-lane steel truss bridge over the Kessler Creek. I mean old. From when wagons were still a thing. County never had the budget to replace it." He picked a flake of paint off the bench. "One winter, school lets out early because of a storm," he went on. "Busload of kids heads home. Driver takes Old Mill, like he's done 1,000 times. Only this time, whiteout hits at the wrong moment. Depending on who you ask, he either couldn't see the bridge or he saw it too late. Goes right through the guardrail. Bus drops into the creek. Ice gives, water's nearly freezing. He didn't have to spell out the rest. I'd grown up around here. I'd heard versions of the story. The old-timers in town talked about it sometimes at the cafe. 19 kids in the driver. They pulled some out, not all. After that," Mason said, "they closed the bridge, built a new one a mile downstream. But people kept crashing out there in storms. Good drivers, too. Guys who knew the road. It got this reputation. County started putting the barricades up early whenever a blizzard was forecast, but every few years, someone ignores them, and that road eats someone else." He shrugged one shoulder like he was trying to shake off a chill. Old guys say the bus still drives that road when it snows hard enough, he added. Like it didn't realize it went off the bridge. You hear the engine, see the headlights in the whiteout. Kids banging on the windows. That kind of crap. He gave me a sideways look. I don't put much stock in that, he said a little too quickly. But I've been out there on bad nights. It's not right. The wind sounds different. Your headlights don't reach as far as they should. Like the dark's thicker. He straightened and grabbed a wrench. Anyway, you heard the rule. You get assigned Old Mill. You don't plow it till you can see the sun, even if it's just a gray smear behind the clouds. I laughed it off. Guys who work nights on empty roads in the middle of nowhere tell stories. It's how they keep from going crazy. Ghost buses, phantom hitchhikers, weird lights in the sky. Half of it is boredom. The other half is diesel fumes and too much coffee. At least, that's what I told myself. The storm that changed my mind hit 3 years later. It was the kind of system the National Weather Service puts out special graphics for. Historic. Once in a generation. Blizzard warning in effect for the following 27 counties. We knew it was coming for days. The guys in the shop sharpened blades, checked chains, topped off hydraulic fluid. The county topped up the salt sheds. The foreman adjusted routes so the guys with the best instincts, meaning the old-timers, covered the worst stretches. I'd been at it a while by then. 7 winters behind a plow. I knew every dip and curve in our corner of the state. I'd seen cars slide into ditches right in front of me and help pull them out with my tow chain. I'd watched a farmer cry in his barn doorway while his livestock froze in the field because the drifts were over the fence posts and we couldn't get there in time. Winter out here doesn't care how tough you are. It just grinds you down. That afternoon before the storm, the mood in the shop was lighter than you'd expect. There's a weird kind of energy before a big one. It's like standing in front of a wave with your shoulders squared. You know it's going to hit you, but you're ready to push back. Red went over assignments at the map again, his fingers stabbing at loops of color. Jake, you're on Route C tonight, he said. You got County 9, the hospital spur, and... He hesitated. Old Mill, but only after sunrise. Same as always. He frowned, tapping the map where Old Mill intersected the east side of town. We got a problem, though, he added. New hospital administrator raised hell with the board this morning. Says we can't keep cutting off Old Mill overnight. Claims it adds 7 minutes to transport time from the east side if the river bridge ices. He got the damn commissioners to pass some emergency access resolution. He shook his head in disgust. So, he said reluctantly, if dispatch calls out an ambulance on that side while the storm's in full swing, they expect us to cut through on Old Mill. I told them they can come drive the damn plow themselves if they want to play chicken with a ghost bus. But you know politicians. Wait, I said, so we're breaking the rule now? He met my eyes. We're bending it, he said. You don't touch Old Mill unless you absolutely have to. If you do, you radio me before you put blade to snow. You got that? I nodded. He made a show of rolling his eyes at the rest of the guys. If any of you see a bus full of kids out there, you tell them to take it up with the county commissioners, he said. A couple of the older drivers laughed, but it sounded forced. By the time my shift started at 8 p.m., the first bands of snow were already blowing past the streetlights outside the shop in tight, slanting lines. By 9, it was like someone had shaken a globe around the whole county. Everything beyond the first row of houses turned to swirling gray. By 10, the wind came up. If you've never heard 30, 40-mile-an-hour wind howl across open fields in sub-zero temperatures, there's no good way to explain it. It's not a whistle or a roar. It's this low, steady scream that gets under your skin. The cab of my plow shivered with every gust. The snow didn't just fall, it moved sideways, clawing at the windshield. We rolled anyway. My route started in town. Main Street, the uphill to the nursing home, the stretch past the Walmart. People still out doing last-minute grocery runs for storm snacks for some insane reason. I went around them as best I could, laying salt and pushing slush toward the curbs. By 11, the roads in town were passable. Not great, but passable. The scanner crackled with calls, 2 slide-offs on the interstate, a heart attack on the north side, a fire alarm at the mill that turned out to be a malfunction. Out past the edge of town, my high beams swallowed by white, I turned onto County 9. That road runs straight east from the service agent out to a cluster of houses and the old truck stop. Beyond that, it T-bones into Old Mill. That night, the plow felt like it was floating. For those who don't know, you don't drive a plow as much as you feel it. You sit high, above the blade, and you read the edges of the drift where the snow meets the ditch. You feel the hiss of the steel across packed powder, the lurch when you hit compressed snow from a previous pass. After a few winters, you can drive half the time by instinct. That night, my instincts were screaming. The drifts were already up to the hood in places. I'd creep up to them, drop the blade, and punch through, the engine growling, the whole truck shuddering. Powder exploded over the windshield in waves so thick the wipers couldn't keep up. For a second each time, I'd be blind, trusting straight and speed. Then the world would snap back into focus for a few yards before the next white wall appeared. Route C to base, I said into the radio at one point, trying not to sound as tense as I felt. 9 is still open, but visibility's about 20 feet. I'm making maybe 15 miles an hour. Anyone in front of me is dead meat if their car's stalled. Red's voice came back lazy and laced with static. Copy, C. You got 27 backing you up, but he's still finishing the South Industrial. No one should be out there except you. State Patrol's been closing exits like it's their side hustle. I grunted acknowledgement, eyes never leaving the white void in front of me. I hit the intersection with Old Mill around midnight. Even in a storm, you can feel when a road changes. The plow rolled from the chewed-up, sanded surface of 9 onto untouched snow. Old Mill hadn't seen a blade since maybe late afternoon. Wind had had hours to play with it. The barricades were up, just like always. 2 sawhorse frames with orange reflectors, half buried now, and a road closed sign leaning between them. Beyond that, nothing but a flat white tunnel. I pulled up to the line and idled there, heater blasting lukewarm air. The temptation to drop the blade and make a pass, just to feel like I'd done my job, was strong. The storm didn't care about our superstitions. Snow was snow. Then I remembered Mason's face when he'd said, "It's not right out there," and Red's hard eyes at the map. I reached for the radio. "Base, Route C, I'm at the 9 and 47 junction," I said. "Barricades are in place on Old Mill. No sign of anyone trying to go around. Heading back west to hit the hospital spur again." "Copy," Red said immediately. "Good. Leave Old Mill till daylight." I put the truck in gear, turned the wheel, and made a windy, slow U-turn, throwing a wave of snow across the entrance to Old Mill for good measure. As I swung the plow around, my headlights swept across the first 100 feet of 47. For a split second, I thought I saw something. Not shape exactly. More like the suggestion of something darker inside the white. A long, rounded shadow, too high to be a car, and the wrong dimensions for a semi. 2 points of faint, yellowish glow at what would have been windshield height. Then the truck completed its turn, and the lights dragged away. "Jesus," I muttered under my breath. "Get a grip, man." I told myself I was just seeing reflections from my own markers, bouncing off the snow. When you stare into a blizzard for hours, your brain starts filling in shapes, the way it does with static on TV. I went back to work. The night took on that weird, timeless quality big storms always have. Cab lights dim, dashboard glow. The monotonous whine of the engine. Blade up, blade down, salt on, salt off. Time stops belonging to you when you're out there. It belongs to the storm. I don't know exactly when the call came in. Sometime after 1, before 2, I was halfway down County 9 again, when dispatch's voice cut through the static. "All units, stand by for priority traffic," she said. I recognized Kelly by the clipped, businesslike way she spoke when things were bad. "We have a report of a female in labor on the east side, address 1413 River Oaks. Repeat, 1413 River Oaks. Ambulance en route, stuck at 9 and 15 due to drifts. Route C, can you advise?" My hands tightened on the wheel. River Oaks was on the east side of the county, past the river. The fastest way there from town, if the interstate was closed, was Old Mill. I grabbed the mic. "Base C," I said. 9 is open but drifting fast. Old Mill is still closed and unplowed. Static hissed for a second. Then Red came on. "Dispatch base," he said. "Tell the ambulance to stage at the 9 and Old Mill junction. Route C's in position. We'll get them a lane through. My heart dropped into my stomach. Red, I started. Jake, he cut in, his voice lower now, meant just for me. We got a woman in labor out there. If something goes sideways and that baby dies because we didn't open the damn road, the board will hang us both. You radioed me, like I asked. Time to see if the old stories are just stories. I stared through the windshield into the white. For a second, I considered saying no, just flat out refusing. Let them fire me. Let them argue with a ghost bus themselves. Then I pictured some poor woman, belly tight with contractions, stuck in a farmhouse on the other side of this hell, bleeding, the baby's heart rate dropping. I've seen what happens when an ambulance can't get somewhere in time. It sticks with you. Copy, I said finally, my voice sounding far away in my own ears. I'm turning onto 47 now. I'll cut one lane, just enough for EMS to get through, then I'm out. You keep them behind me. 10-4, Red said. And Jake? Yeah? Don't stop, for anything. Not unless you can see daylight under your own damn wheels. He clicked off. I pulled up to the barricades again. They looked smaller now, half swallowed by drifts, their reflective strips dull with ice. For a second, the thought crossed my mind that I could just not. Knock one over, claim the wind did it, say I tried, and turn back. The scanner beeped softly on another channel. Kelly's voice again, this time tighter. EMS, be advised, patient's contractions 2 minutes apart. Husband reports heavy bleeding. Time is critical. I sighed, tasted copper where I'd bitten my tongue without realizing. All right, I muttered. Let's see what you've got, old mill. I nudged the plow forward and tapped the blade lever. The steel dropped with a thud I felt in my feet. The instant the blade bit into the untouched snow on Old Mill, the wind died. I don't mean it calmed, it just stopped. 1 second the storm was screaming against the cab. The next, silence. The snow was still there. In fact, if anything, it was thicker, a tunnel of swirling gray in my headlights. But the sound of it slapping the glass vanished. The engine hummed in my ears, suddenly too loud. My own breath rasped in the cab. Every hair on my arms lifted under my thermal layers. Radio check, I said, fighting the urge to throw the truck into reverse. Base, you still got me? Nothing. Base, this is Route C, radio check, I repeated. A long hiss of static crawled back. Faintly under it, I thought I heard something else. Children, not words. Not yet. Just that particular pitch of chatter little kids have when they're changing boots, wrestling with backpacks, complaining about the cold. I lifted my thumb off the mic like it had burned me. You're hearing things, I whispered to myself. It's the storm. It's in your head. I eased my foot down on the accelerator. The plow pushed forward into Old Mill, engine grumbling, blades sending up twin curls of snow to either side. My headlights burned a tunnel, maybe 30, 40 feet ahead. Beyond that, nothing but white. After 50 yards, the barricades vanished in the mirror. The feeling of wrongness didn't. Every plow guy knows the sensation of tires on solid road versus slush versus gravel. You feel it in your hands before you feel it in the cab. Old Mill under me felt slippery in a way that wasn't just ice, like there was a half-inch of something oily between the rubber and the asphalt. I focused on the faint, dark lines of the ditches on either side, barely visible through the blowing snow, and kept my speed to 10 miles an hour. About 200 yards in, I saw the footprints. They just appeared in my headlights, 10 feet in front of the blade. Perfect, crisp impressions, half filled with blowing powder, small, child-sized. A staggered double line down the center of the unplowed road. Barely any drift had collected in them, which meant they were fresh. Fresh in a place where I knew, absolutely knew, no one had been on foot since before the storm started. I should have stopped. I should have radioed, turned around, something. Instead, I did what snowplow drivers do when there's something in the road. I buried it. The blade roared over the prints, filled them in, erased them from the world. I watched them disappear under steel and snow, and something deep in my gut went cold. A voice, clear as if the speaker was sitting in the passenger seat next to me, spoke in my head. They were trying to walk out. I jerked my head around, heart thudding. The seat was empty. Of course it was. My own voice sounded ridiculous when I spoke out loud, too loud in the quiet cab. You're tired, Bishop, I told myself. You've been at this too long. Get the ambulance, a path, and get the hell off this road. The radio popped. Copy, 27, Will. The rest dissolved in static. I grabbed the mic like a lifeline. Base, this is C. I'm about a quarter mile onto Old Mill. I lost you for a bit. You reading me? A voice came back, tinny and distant, full of hiss. Any unit. This is bus 14 on Old Mill, it said. We're act up. Can't see the bridge. I got kids panicking in the back. Anyone read? It was a man's voice, probably 40 or 50, strained but trying to stay calm the way drivers do when kids are watching. I heard the murmur of children behind him, crying, complaining, shrill questions. Every inch of me went ice. Say again, I whispered into the mic. Static swallowed the channel. When it cleared, I heard Kelly. Pete, EMS will be staging at 9:47, she was saying, oblivious to what I just heard. Route C, advise when you're close. I swallowed hard. C, copy, I said. My own voice sounded thin. I'm, maybe half a mile in, making slow progress. Visibility near zero. You're doing good, Jake, Red's voice cut in, reassuring. Just keep your blade down and your ass in the seat. We got you on GPS. I checked the little unit bolted to the dash. My truck was a tiny green triangle crawling down a straight gray line labeled CORD 47. No other icons nearby. No school bus symbol. No nothing. Yeah, I lied. Got it. I kept going. The further I drove, the weirder it got. The storm outside the cab still looked like a storm. The snow whipping across my beams, the powder curling over the hood and sliding off the sides. But it didn't sound like one. My ears popped like we'd climbed in altitude. My own breath sounded wet and too loud. At one point, I realized I could see my reflection faintly in the driver's side window, like it was dark outside instead of white. Behind my own shape in the glass, blurry and colorless, I thought I saw other faces, smaller, pressed close like kids trying to see into a candy store. When I whipped my head around, there was nothing there but the storm. Cut it out, I muttered at myself. You're psyching yourself up. I passed the 3-mile marker, then the 4. Time stretched, then the world narrowed down to 2 points of light. They appeared ahead of me, deep in the tunnel of snow. Faint, yellow-orange, swaying slightly. Headlights, at the height of a bus. For a second, a normal explanation lined up in my brain. Some idiot school bus driver had, for whatever reason, tried to use Old Mill as a way around the interstate closure. Maybe he'd been picking up workers from a factory or running a late route, I didn't know. Maybe the district hadn't gotten the road closure notice or had ignored it. Either way, there was a vehicle ahead of me where no vehicle should be. I reached for the air horn and laid on it. The sound blasted out into the white, shaking the cab, reverberating in my chest. The lights ahead didn't change. They didn't get brighter or move aside or flash brake lights. They just hung there. I dropped my speed to a crawl, heart hammering. As the plow crept forward, those lights took on more detail. I could see the way they were set, close together, the faint suggestion of a curved hood between them. Something bulky and rounded loomed behind them, higher than my cab. It looked like every yellow school bus I'd ever followed down a city street. Base, this is C, I said, my voice cracking. I've got another vehicle on Old Mill. Looks like a bus. Any idea what the hell that would be? Static. Then very faintly, not on my frequency at all, but somehow coming through every speaker in the cab at once, a man's voice said, "Kids, stay in your seats, okay? Stay calm. We're just gonna wait for help." The hair on the back of my neck prickled so hard it hurt. "Base," I said again, louder. "You reading any of this?" Nothing. No Kelly, no Red, just that weird muffled backdrop of children's voices. And under it, somewhere farther away, something else. A deep, throbbing sound, like water under ice. The headlights ahead didn't get any closer. That was the worst part. I was moving, I could feel it. The plow was chewing up untouched snow. The odometer ticked. I watched the milepost creep by out of the corner of my eye when the visibility dipped just enough. But those two pale orbs stayed the same distance away, floating in the void. Like I was on a treadmill made of road. Some part of my brain whispered that if I kept driving, I'd never reach them. That I'd just keep pushing forward into that white forever. The bus, a carrot on a stick, held by something that didn't understand how time worked. I don't know what finally made me stop. Maybe it was the way my GPS still showed me less than half a mile onto Old Mill, when I knew damn well I'd driven farther than that. Maybe it was the way the silence outside the cab had started to feel like pressure, like the air itself was waiting to see what I'd do. Or maybe it was the voice, not in the radio this time, not outside, right behind my ear. "Can we ride with you, mister?" I slammed both feet on the brake. The plow shuddered, the blade scraping, the transmission complaining. We shuddered to a halt. Snow piled up in front of the blade like a wave hitting a wall. My breath came in harsh, white puffs. Slowly, every muscle screaming, I turned my head just enough to see the passenger seat. It was empty. For a second. Then, like condensation on glass resolving into a face as you get closer, a shape thickened in the space beside me. A little boy, maybe 8 or 9, in an old-fashioned winter coat, the kind made of some heavy, dark fabric, not modern nylon. Wool cap pulled down over his ears. His hair looked wet, slicked down. His cheeks were unnaturally pale. He wasn't quite solid. I could see the outline of the opposite window through him, the ghost of my own reflection. But he was there enough that when he shifted, the seat creaked. He was sitting very straight, hands on his knees like he'd been told to sit properly for the bus. His eyes were wrong. They weren't empty pits or glowing coals or anything out of a movie. They were just deep, too deep. Like if I stared into them long enough, I'd fall in and never hit bottom. "We're cold," he said. His breath didn't fog in the air when he spoke, but the temperature in the cab dropped 10 degrees in an instant. The heater stopped working when he swallowed like the word wouldn't come. "Can we ride with you?" Instinct screamed at me to open the door, haul him in, wrap him in my spare blanket, radio for help. Another older instinct, some animal part of me that still remembered what it felt like to be hunted in the dark, screamed even louder, "Don't you dare." My hand sat glued to my thigh. My voice came out as a croak. I cleared my throat, tried again. "What's your name, buddy?" He blinked like the question surprised him. "Danny," he said, "Danny Price." The name meant nothing to me in that moment. Later, when I went looking, I'd find it in a list of obituaries from 1978. Daniel Price, age 9 of Kessler Township, died Friday. Beloved son. My own first name is Jacob Daniel. I try not to think about that too hard. "Okay, Danny," I said, forcing my mouth to shape the words. Where are you coming from?" "The bus," he said, like it was obvious. He tilted his head toward the hood, toward those unmoving headlights in the distance. "We went off. The water's cold." His voice broke a little on that last word. "Mrs. Larson told us to stay in our seats, but the back window is under. Kathy's crying. Tommy's nose is bleeding. Mrs. Larson won't wake up." He looked back at me, eyes huge. "No one came," he said. "We waited and waited and waited and no one came. We tried to walk, but the snow was too deep." I thought of the footprints. My throat closed. "How long have you been waiting, Danny?" I whispered. Something flickered in his expression. Confusion. A glimpse of age under the baby face. "A long time," he said slowly. "Sometimes it's dark. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there are cars on the road, but they go right through us. Sometimes we hear sirens, but they're very far away." His gaze dropped to my gloved hands on the wheel. "We heard your truck," he went on. "It sounded big, like it could push. We thought maybe you could take us home." He smiled then, small and hopeful. It was the most disturbing thing I'd seen all night. "You're a driver. Drivers help us." I realized my cheeks were wet. I hadn't even felt the tears start. "I can't help you," I said, the words tearing out of me. "Not the way you want. I'm sorry." The temperature in the cab dropped again. Frost feathered along the inside of the windshield. etching patterns across the glass despite the defroster wheezing at full blast. The boy's expression didn't change. That was somehow worse than if he'd gotten angry. "We'll be good," he said earnestly. "We'll sit real quiet. We won't make a mess. We'll ride along, and when you get to wherever you're going, you can open the door and we'll get off." He swallowed. "We're so tired," he whispered. "We just want to go home." Every instinct I had was at war. On one side, compassion, training, the ingrained habit of anyone whose job it is to show up when the worst thing in someone's life is happening. You don't leave a kid in a wreck. You don't. On the other, a bone-deep certainty that if I agreed, if I even said the words yes, "Oh, come on in," they wouldn't be the only ones getting off when we reached wherever I was going. That there was a reason no one plowed this road at night. That reason currently sat in my passenger seat. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Me gripping the wheel, knuckles white under my gloves. Him watching me, head tilted, breath invisible. Finally, I squeezed my eyes shut for a second and pictured something mundane. My wife, asleep in our bed at home, back when I still had one. The stupid green ceramic frog my niece had made me for Christmas, sitting on my kitchen counter, mouth forever open. The pile of bills on the table, the half-finished deck I'd been promising to finish next summer for years. Anchors, things that existed in a world where the dead didn't ask to ride shotgun. When I opened my eyes, Danny was still there. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it more than I've probably meant anything in my life. "I can't take you with me." His face went very still. For a second, the storm outside the cab seemed to lean in, pressing against the glass, listening. "You're supposed to help," he said softly. "You're a driver." "I'm not your driver," I said, my voice shaking. "The one who was yours. He did what he could. I can't fix what already happened." Something in his eyes changed. They'd been deep and eerie before. Now, for a heartbeat, they were just a little boy's, hurt, bewildered. "Okay," he said finally. He didn't move, but the frost on the windshield retreated slightly, like someone had exhaled warm air against it. "We'll keep waiting," he added in that same small voice. There was no anger in it. That was somehow worse. Then he was gone. Not with a flash or a jump scare. One moment he was sitting there, the impression of weight in the cushion, that bone-deep cold in the air. The next, the seat was just a seat. The silence in the WAP roared. I realized I could hear the wind again, shrieking around the truck. The two headlights ahead winked out like someone had pinched candles. Through the suddenly honest storm, my own beams punched forward farther than before, illuminating the road ahead. Maybe 30 yards in front of me, the faint outline of the new bridge over the creek emerged from the white. Concrete guardrails, metal reflectors, snow feathering off the top. There was no bus. There were no other tire tracks. Just virgin snow and my own blade marks. The spell, whatever it was, broke. The radio crackled to life, loud enough to make me jump. "Ake, you copy? Route C, respond." Kelly's voice snapped. She sounded borderline panicked. "We lost your GPS dot for 6 minutes. Say your status." I grabbed the mic with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. "C is... I'm here," I said. I had to clear my throat halfway through. "I'm, maybe 200 yards west of the creek bridge. Cutting a lane, sorry. Radio I must have been in a dead zone." Red's voice cut in, tight. "You went off my screen, kid," he said. "You don't do that. You got me 10 new gray hairs." "Sorry, Base," I said again automatically. "Save the apologies," he grunted. "How's the road look?" I looked ahead, then in the mirror. Fresh, high drifts in front of me. A plowed channel behind, maybe a lane and a half wide. The storm was already trying to fill it back in, but it was a path. "It's passable," I said. "Bring them up behind me one at a time. Tell them to keep their speed down and their eyes on my taillights." "Copy," he said. "Ambulance, you copy that?" "Copy," a male voice said on another channel. "We're at 9 and 47. We got eyes on C's lights now." I glanced in the mirror. Sure enough, through the churn of snow, a smaller, more distant pair of beams glowed, threading their way into the path I'd cut. I took a deep breath, forced my foot back onto the accelerator, and eased the plow forward across the bridge. As my front tires rolled onto the span, an image hit me so hard I nearly blacked out. Not a vision exactly, more like a memory I didn't own. Same bridge, only the old one. Metal trusses arching overhead instead of concrete rails. A yellow bus, its front wheel halfway through a smashed guardrail. Headlights slanting down into black water. Children screaming. The taste of copper in my mouth where I'd bitten my tongue on impact. My hands welded to a steering wheel that had punched me in the chest. Ice cracking beneath a heavy weight. The tinny voice of a CB radio bleating for help into a winter nobody was listening to. Then it was gone. I realized I'd stopped breathing. I forced air into my lungs, focused on the real bridge under me. Solid concrete humming under the tires. The plow made it across. The GPS chirped as I passed some invisible marker into better coverage. Old Mill started its gentle curve toward the river communities. Behind me, the ambulance's lights bobbed steadily in the mirror. For the next 15 minutes, I did what I'd set out to do. I plowed Old Mill. I kept my eyes on the road, my speed slow, my radio chatter boring. I didn't look at the passenger seat. I didn't look at the side windows. Once, out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a line of small shapes standing in the ditch. Kids in snow-stiff coats, clutching lunch pails and book bags. I looked away. The plow kept moving. We reached the River Oaks turnoff. I cut them a path down the lane. Blades hissing, heart thudding. The ambulance turned off behind me, tires crunching over the packed snow I'd left. Route C to EMS, I said, my voice steadier now. You should be able to make it the rest of the way. I'm turning around. Copy C, the medic's voice came back, tight with adrenaline. Thanks, we'll let you know how it goes. Good luck, I said and meant it. I found a driveway wide enough to three-point turn that beast of a truck, swung her around and headed back the way we'd come. Old Mill looked normal in that direction. Just another bad winter road. My own tracks already half filled in by blowing snow. As I approached the creek bridge again, I slowed to a crawl, curiosity and dread ward in my chest. At the west end of the bridge, on the north side of the road, there's a small turnout where fishermen park in summer. That night, a drift had half buried it, a smooth white hump against the darker line of the trees. As my beam swept over it, something caught the light. Metal. I eased the plow to a stop, heart in my throat. There, half sticking out of the snowbank like a tombstone, was an old, rusted piece of steel. It might have been part of a guardrail once, or a signpost. The paint was mostly wound, but in my high beams, I could just make out a faint rectangle of yellow, ghostly under the ice. Letters had been worn down to bumps. Only two were really clear. I stared at it for a long time, my breath fogging the cab. Then I put the truck in gear and left it behind. The storm finally broke around dawn. By the time I rolled back into the county shop, everything hurt. My eyes felt like sandpaper. My back throbbed. My hands didn't want to unclench from the wheel. The guys on day shift were coming in, stomping snow off their boots, talking about drifts like small houses and roads that had completely disappeared under ground blizzards. I parked the plow, went through the shutdown routine on autopilot, and stumbled into the break room. Red was there, pouring coffee. He took one look at me and didn't say the thing I could see he wanted to say. Something about me looking like death warmed over. Instead, he slid a mug toward me. You got EMS through, he said. Kid's fine, 8 pounds something. They named him after his grandpa. Or maybe their dog. I wasn't really listening. I managed a crooked smile. Good, I said. My voice sounded raw. For a minute, we just stood there, the smell of burned-on coffee between us. Finally, I set the mug down, untouched. I saw him, I said. Red didn't pretend not to understand. He stared into his cup, then nodded once. Kid in the seat? He asked quietly. Yeah. Asked to ride along? Yeah. Did you let him? No. He looked up at me then, and in his eyes I saw a weight I hadn't noticed before. Lines etched deep from winters spent watching other people's lives spin out on ice. Good, he said. You'd be surprised how many do, the first time. It's hard saying no to a kid in trouble. I swallowed. What happens if you say yes? I asked. Even though I thought I already knew, he took a long sip, considering. Depends, he said finally. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes you just feel Wrong, like you tracked something in on your boots. It sticks in the cab for a while. Radio acts up, GPS glitches more than usual. He rubbed a thumb along the rim of the mug. Sometimes, he went on, voice lower now, you don't make it home. We've lost plow drivers on that stretch, Jake. Good ones. Guys who knew Old Mill like their own driveway. Road straight, weather's bad, but not that bad. And then they're in the ditch, cab full of snow. No skid marks, no sign they even hit the brakes. He met my eyes. After the second one, he said, we stopped plowing it at night unless we absolutely had to. Call us superstitious, I don't care. County board can write all the resolutions they want from their nice warm chairs. We're the ones out there. We earned our ghosts. The room felt very small. Why didn't anyone warn me, I asked. I knew how childish it sounded as soon as it left my mouth, but I couldn't help it. He gave a humorless half smile. We did, he said. Back at the map. Don't plow Old Mill at night, don't stop. Radio before you go on. That's the warning. If I'd told you, hey, sometimes dead kids hitchhike in your cab, you'd have thought I was messing with you. Or you'd have gone out there looking for them or for them. Either way, you'd be more likely to see them. He shrugged one shoulder. That's how it works, far as I can tell, he added. The road, it likes attention. The more you talk about it, the more you stare down it. When you drive past, the more it notices you back. I thought of the way the storm had gone silent, the instant my blade touched Old Mill, the way the headlights had hung in front of me like bait. So now what, I said. I just avoid it? Pretend it's not there? He shook his head. You treat it like any other bad stretch of road, he said. You give it respect. You follow the rules. You don't go out there to prove anything. And when the snow's deep and the night's thick, you remember there are some things you can't fix, no matter how big your truck is. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled something out. A small laminated card, corners worn white. Found this week after the bus went in, he said, pushing it across the table. It was an old student ID, the colors washed out, the logo of a school that didn't exist anymore. A little boy smiled up at me from the plastic, dark hair combed over, front teeth slightly crooked. Name, Daniel Price. Grade, my stomach flipped. He told me his name, I said, in the truck. Red nodded like that didn't surprise him. They all have, he said quietly, to somebody. I slid the card back toward him like it was something that could burn. Why keep that, I asked. He shrugged, but there was no flippancy in it. Reminds me, he said, on the nice days, when the road looks harmless. For every time I get some idiot on the county board whining about liability and access, like those aren't just fancy words for go die so we don't get sued. He slid the ID back into his pocket. Also, he added, it's good to remember they were real kids, not just shadows. They had lives, lunchboxes, favorite cartoons. They weren't born to be a story we tell in the break room. I didn't finish that cup of coffee. I don't remember much else from that morning, except going home, standing under a scalding shower until the hot water ran out, and then lying in bed staring at the ceiling while the wind rattled the windows. I went back to work. Bills don't stop for ghosts. I plowed that winter and the ones after, same as always. I stayed off Old Mill at night, on clear, sunny days when the sky was a high blue bowl and the snow sparkled like the inside of a freezer. I drove over the new bridge without a second thought, radio crackling with boring chatter. Once, about 2 years later, I was driving my personal truck into town on a bright January afternoon. No wind, no drifts, just smooth, hard-packed snow. As I passed the west end of Old Mill, I glanced down the road almost without thinking. For a heartbeat in the shimmering light over the asphalt, I thought I saw it. A pale, elongated shape far down the straightaway, rounded front, windows full of kids' faces pressed to the glass. A hand lifted in a wave. Then a pickup came around the curve from the other direction, real and solid, and the mirage shattered. Maybe it was just heat rising from the road in that weird way it sometimes does, even in winter. Maybe it was a trick of glare in my guilty conscience. Or maybe the bus still makes its route, in the places where the plow's blade breaks the line between then and now. I don't drive nights anymore. When my back finally gave out enough to make the doctor say no more bouncing around in a truck for 12 hours a shift, I moved into a job at the highway department office. Paperwork, scheduling, fielding calls from residents who think we control the weather. Sometimes in meetings, a new commissioner will complain about Old Mill. Why's that stretch always the last to get plowed? They'll ask, tapping printouts of rote logs with their neat manicured fingers. We've had 3 complaints this month from people out by the river. Can't we prioritize them earlier? I'll smile and say something about budget and manpower and how we're doing our best. I don't tell them about the night the storm went quiet, the footprints, the boy in my passenger seat asking for a ride like he was asking for a glass of water. I don't tell them I know now why the old guys tilt their coffee cups and stare at the table whenever a big snow is in the forecast. But when the maps come out and it's time to assign routes, I put a little yellow highlighter mark next to Old Mill, just enough to catch my eye, to remind me there are some places on the map that exist in more than one winter at once. Some accidents don't end. They just wait. Wait for the next storm, the next driver, the next chance, however small, that someone will say yes. If you ever find yourself out here in a whiteout, on a road that feels like it goes on forever, and your radio pops and you hear a man's voice you can't quite place saying he's a school bus on Old Mill, asking for help. If, through the blur of snow, you see 2 pale headlights that never seem to get closer, no matter how far you drive. If you catch, out of the corner of your eye, a little face in the passenger seat that isn't really there, and a small voice asks if they can ride with you, just for a little while, keep your hands on the wheel, keep your eyes on the road, and as hard as it is, say no. Because out there, in the flat, white miles of the Midwest in winter, not every cry for help is one you're meant to answer.